Finally, just getting off. I know she ain't gonna miss this.
We got new chairs now.
Freaking A, man.
Green is hard to read. If you flip to the next page.
You know what you
That's the
didn't notice?
section that you'd ask, and yeah, I'll try to make it more clear, but, you know, in extensions would be,
We took the one of the language.
Those are the old ones?
This is the best.
Okay, the time of 5:30 having arrived, I'm going to call the special meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. Please join me in this Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Here.
Here.
Alderman Williams.
Here.
Alderman Philjimsey.
Here.
Alderwoman Purchase.
Here.
Alderwoman DeCenso. She is here with us.
So I understand Alderwoman DeCenso is calling in. If
Okay.
when we finish the roll, we can recognize her.
Alderman McMiniman.
Here.
Alderwoman Connolly.
Present.
Alderman Donlin.
Here.
Alderman Hanauer.
Here.
Madam Chair, a quorum is present.
Thank you. And I would ask for a motion to allow Alderwoman DeCenso to participate by telephone.
So moved. Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Welcome, Alderwoman.
Hold on. Can you hear us?
Maybe she's playing video games.
Lost her.
Okay, well, we'll let you get her back in on the call. And we'll just start real quickly with an overview. Obviously, this special meeting of the Committee of the Whole. So first thing first, we will not be taking any final action tonight. The sole purpose of this meeting tonight and the conversation will be directed entirely at the city's planned use of the American Recovery Plan Act funds. Anyone who wishes to comment tonight must limit their comments solely to this proposal. And I'm going to hold you very tightly to 5 minutes tonight because we have another meeting tomorrow, and I know we don't want to spend too much time in these chambers if we don't have to. That said, we have an historic opportunity in front of us. I appreciate everyone coming tonight so that we could have a conversation out in the open among council members about how the needs in our wards, the needs in our city, and discuss what our plans are for spending these funds so that we can make changes that will be not just immediate but lasting and have a deep impact in our community. Since the mayor has done such a lovely job of giving us a presentation last week as a guide, I thought we might use that and follow through just in the order of that he has presented topics. It makes it easy. We've all seen it before, so we can kind of structure our thoughts around that way. So with that said, I'd like to start with our first topic that was in the mayor's presentation, infrastructure modernization. Since this will largely deal with public works, I'm assuming our public works director will be available to answer any questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I think it's a good idea to go through the mayor's presentation in sequence. And can I just make a brief comment regarding one of the earliest slides regarding
Absolutely.
funding and timeline?
Yep, let's go back to timeline.
So that was very helpful, Mr. Mayor, that you gave us the timeline. And what I think is really significant about that timeline is that, and I've discussed this with Director McCarty earlier today, is that the city has until December 31, 2024 to obligate these funds. So there's lots of time to get this right. And let's be mindful that the next city council and whoever's sitting around this horseshoe will want to be able to hopefully participate in the decision-making for some of these funds, half of which we receive next year. So just wanted to get that out in front, that we have until December 31, 2024 to obligate these funds, and then we have till December 31, 2026 to actually spend the obligated funds. Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. No, that's a good point.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir. Alderman
just as a
Redpath.
follow-up to Alderman McMinimum, I agree with you, Joe. This is an opportunity for us to use this money, and we may have to wait till the next city council to spend some of this money. But I can tell you, I know from my ward and some of your other wards here that it's important that we use this money now, because if we're going to address infrastructure problems, especially like for sewers and that type of thing, this ain't enough money. I mean,
Completely agree. We have needs right now.
right, we do. So that was my point. So thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Gregory, did you?
Oh, I was waiting on the next infrastructure modernization. If you
Okay, so do we have any other comments about timeline? I just want to quickly add, part of the purpose of this act, when the federal dollars were released, was also to generate economic development just through the jobs and wages that will be paid performing all of these tasks. So, Alderman Redpath, I agree. We certainly have a pressing need for $30 million that we could spend well within the next year. So, okay, that's it. So we will go now. I'm going to wait. Okay, I'm sure the clerk will let us know when we have Alderwoman DeCenso on.
Call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
It's not now. Okay, infrastructure modernization. The mayor's office has proposed putting $11.1 million towards this investment, beginning with sewer initiatives and including revenue replacement. So, Alderman Gregory, would you like to talk about infrastructure?
Sure. Thank you. For my particular ward, sewers, which has been mentioned with a brief overview of our ward meetings, was really a big topic at that meeting. And I reviewed, I asked Nate for some numbers as far as planned projects and sewer issues that have been reported or studied in our ward. And I totaled those up to be approximately $1.9 million. On top of that, I see overhead sewer replacement program, which would benefit not only Ward 2, but all of our wards, is really, really important. I would ask our director, what does a typical overhead drainage project for a regular home cost? Just so I can put it around my mind, please.
Ballpark, it's around $5,000 to $6,000.
$5,000-6,000? Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
You probably want to just stay up here.
You might want to sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good attempt, but no.
So I think that, along with, for however we put this in the budget, one of my goals is to try to get all of those projects completed, as well as come up with something with all of you for our revenue, our overhead sewer replacement program. I think that's going to be important, not only to my ward, but all of the inner city older wards that really have some significant sewer issues.
I agree. Alderman Dunlap?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to belabor this point tonight, but I do feel it needs to be read into the record. We've discussed on multiple occasions the problem with a major drainage problem and safety issue at the intersections of Washington Street and Cokie Mill. It is a safety hazard, a flooding hazard that impacts the entire city, but specifically wards 9, 8, and 10. But I venture to say there's a significant amount of people that utilize this road based on traffic counts, and it's something that needs addressed. I know Public Works is in the process of engineering internally for the project that goes from Washington all the way to Old Jack, and I just wanted to make sure that that is a priority and like it to be considered, because it is such an ongoing problem. It's been going on for years. And I did want to ask the director one question about the project. How far along, really, it's one question, two parts. How about that? How far along is the engineering, and is there a plan, or can there be a plan to phase it? Because there's a road component that deals with drainage, and there's also this major drainage problems, as you well know, Director.
Yeah, right now, they're working on the hydraulic report, obviously, with the major flooding issue. That should be wrapped up within the next month or so, and then we are planning on having a public meeting, and then we'll move into the design engineering after that. So it could be ready for construction, I would say, within a year and a half.
Okay, my fear is with this. My fear is with the problems that go on at this intersection is, even with a minor rain event, as you well know, the road has to be closed. And the problem with that practice is it will rain unexpectedly, the road will flood, our crews aren't out there yet. Now, they do a great job, don't get me wrong, but and somebody tries to drive through it because they don't know the area, and something bad happens. And we don't want that to happen, obviously, so I just, if we can keep it moving along as fast as possible, anything we can do, please don't hesitate to ask. I think it needs to be a part of this because it is going to be a game-changing improvement to that area of the city, economic development, safety of the citizens, and I can go on and on and on. But thank you for the consideration, and let me bring it up this evening, Madam Chair.
And it is possible we could potentially phase the project. Limit-wise, we tend to get good unit prices with a project of that size going from Old Jack to Washington Street. But we can definitely take a look at that, and we'll talk with consultants about that.
Thank you, Director.
Thanks.
And Director, I would just like to add, because obviously that runs right along my ward also. One of the things that we're seeing is a lot of complaints from people about speeding. We've got new subdivisions going in. I've got Creston Place. There are new subdivisions going in further west and south. Koke Mill itself is taking, and I'm sure you know this, a higher load of traffic. So I think there really is an urgent need. I've seen what people do driving down that road to get kind of skip the Old Jack Veterans Parkway intersection and try to get to the Washington intersection. So I think that is one, I would say, when we're looking at infrastructure investments, that is definitely a project that's going to impact a large number of citizens, and would appreciate having that numbers for that prepared so that we could possibly include that, at least portions of that, with this funding. Alderman Fulgenzi?
Thank you.
And then Alderwoman Purchase.
I don't speak as eloquently as the last two aldermen, but I would like to mention that the North End has significant flooding problems, both in, what is it, out by the, I can't think of the name of it now.
I could tell you where I lost my car.
Out on the
Northgate.
Coke plant. Where?
Northgate area.
Northgate area, and then the area out by the convent area. It's just, it's something that's been going on for years and years and years. And it may not be something that's well-traveled, but it impacts the residents of that area tremendously. And it's something that needs to be addressed, and it's not a short-term solution. Matter of fact, we're under some kind of a mandate from the EPA or?
Correct. We're under an EPA administrative order.
Yeah. This impacts the whole North End. And I think that eventually we just need to do something like that and get that taken care of. So, for whatever it's worth.
And just briefly before Alderwoman Purchase, I understand Alderwoman DeCenso is on the phone now?
She is with us, yes.
Okay. Alderwoman, you present?
Yes, I'm here.
We can hear her too. Perfect. Thank you. Alderwoman Purchase.
Thank you. Nate, I saw the capital improvement plan that you had sent out, and I was just wondering, on page 13, I saw over 40 sewer projects. How much of that would be coming from the American Rescue Dollar funds?
Well, it depends how much we allocate, but unfortunately, due to our operations and everything, that costs around $6 million, so we only have around about $500,000 to $1 million a year to spend on capital improvement projects.
Okay, and a lot of those are very essential areas that I was seeing on here. So how will we prioritize them, since I'm seeing it's over 40 in Ward 5?
Well, they all obviously need to be done. our older areas have the oldest sewer and need the most maintenance. We try to do preventative maintenance as much as possible, lining projects, and that's what we do have allocated. All of these projects have been evaluated. We've basically televised them, and they are in need.
Is that how you came up with the list?
That's how we came up with the list. Our sewer engineering department came up with the list based upon work orders, based upon televising those and the need.
Okay, I'm in agreement with Alderman Fulgenzi about the north end. I've received numerous calls since the mayor had presented this plan, and we have a lot of flooding areas that, people are not able to really get their cars through. And so I just want to make sure that we notate that and figure out which ones are going to actually get done, because this is a lot to see over 40 in Ward 5, where I'm able to look at the dollar amounts to see which ones can be done first, and how will we have like a long-term strategy if we're not able to address each of those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Following up on that, Director, how much would all of those sewer projects run, just so we have the...
I believe that list is $34 million that we have on our
million.
capital improvement plan, yes.
So of this money for the sewer initiatives, for the presentation that we were presented with, how many of those projects were included in this $11.1 million?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that,
So
please?
we were given this infrastructure modernization plan from the mayor. How many of those projects, of the $34 million, are included in this $11.1 million?
It was an estimate, but I believe about 10 of them were included.
10 out of how many?
10.
Right. So how much was that total?
I believe it was around $6 million or so.
So of the $11.1 million that the mayor's plan covers, $6 million of that would go towards immediate sewer projects?
That was our
Okay.
idea.
Do we have capacity to do more than that?
Yeah, and we are planning on leveraging EPA loans. I think they're at 1.1% right now. So we were planning on, with this upcoming fiscal year, we were going to budget $2.5 million worth of bond money to help leverage more lining projects.
Okay, because I don't know if any alderman up at this table can say that they're comfortable with the sewers in their ward. We didn't have huge rain this weekend, but I got complaints all weekend from water overflows and sewer concerns. So I think we probably need to be looking at possibly more money for sewer issues. Am I hearing any? Yes, Mayor.
All right, we shut him off.
How about that?
I didn't
Thank
do
you.
that.
Anyway, with regards to this plan as we move forward, the whole key is, as Alderman Redpath said, there's not enough money, so how do you stretch those dollars as much as possible? What we asked Nate to do is come up with $34 million, how you want to spend it. And as Alderwoman Purchase said, there's just in Ward 5, 40 projects, so that's the significance of it. So really what we're looking at is the long-term strategy, and in answer to Alderman Donlan's question about Kokomo, that is a infrastructure project that we're funding. And what I asked Nate to do is go above and beyond what would normally be funded. And so that is road modernization. That's why we call it that. You can ask Alderman Redpath about the lake roads. We finally paved those, and those were roads that haven't been done in decades, 30 years on some cases. So that's what we're trying to look at, above and beyond what we typically could do. But we will look at EPA loans, because right now, as Director Bottom said, they're below 2%. So we should be borrowing as much as we can and fund as much as we can with regards to these funds. But these are just the tip of the iceberg. And so that's what we'll try to do, is leverage it, especially if the federal government comes with the infrastructure program that hopefully passes, hopefully in a bipartisan manner. But that's what we're hoping for, so we can fulfill some of these obligations with regards to sewers.
Thank you. Alderman Gregory?
I'm off the sewers, and I'm on a revenue replacement. I do think that we need to consider that, considering a large chunk of this 11 million going in there, considering the capital improvements, including efforts to convert the oil and chip roads, especially in areas that have high constituent counts. I again asked Nate for a map to see those, and of course, a majority of my ward has all oil and chip roads. I'm really looking to have a lot of those asphalt for multiple reasons, such as drainage, and as well our north side friends have a high concentration of that as well, and I think that's important, to take care of that deep north. I also looked at that, and that's concerning to see that. The rest of the city has some improvements on them, and I know our main streets are for the most part are solid, but many of our side streets really need that conversion, and it really is going to help the neighborhoods altogether.
Thank you, Alderman Redpath.
At the lake, it's a different situation. It's not as necessary flooding as it is sanitary sewers for me. When we get flooded out there, we open up the gates and let the water out of the lake. So that helps us a whole bunch. But long story short is we have this problem with our septic tanks on Lake Springfield, and Mayor's aware of it. I'm aware of it. We've talked to the sanitary district who's cooperating with us to try to get that situation fixed. I don't know that the sanitary sewer replacement is going to be as much as the flooding, the drainage, rainwater drain sewers, because so I don't know that I'm looking at a big number out in my area as much as what Sean was talking about, what you were talking about right away. Those are very essential. Somebody gets they go in those low areas and they try to drive their car through that. It's dangerous. It's real dangerous. And like the mayor said, we could probably spend $300 million trying to fix this problem, but we don't have that kind of money. Dragging this out, and not dragging it out, but extending this out to several different years, what you're going to find is we all have these problems now, and this is something we need to. I'm ready to focus some money on the sewers. Downtown Springfield's been in trouble for years. We still have brick sewers down there. And I remember one proposal back a couple administrations, we tried to turn it over to the sanitary district, and they said, sure, give us $30 million. And right now, I asked the same question to Greg Humphreys the other night, and he said, I don't know, we'll take about $300 million. Then we'll take them off your hands. But it's a problem. We got to fix it. Got to fix it. And one other thing we got is that we got to think about if we're going to go out and try to finance, even with a small interest loan from the EPA. Remember, we're looking at a tough budget next year. We could be looking at anywhere from an $8 to $10 million hole, considering what we heard last week. You all know what I'm talking about. We don't need to get into that, but we got to worry about that budget next year. And the fund balance is going to take a hit.
Thank you. Yes. Alderman Hanauer.
Thank you. We all got issues in our wards that we want fixed. We all do. I've got flooding on a couple streets that really need fixed as well. Couple things about this plan that I think we need to be cautious with. Number one, a couple things that I think we need. Number one, every ward should get something out of this. Every ward. And it should be try as much as we can divide it up as even as possible. I think that's important. The other aspect of this plan, we should not do anything that's going to cause us to have to spend money every year from here on out. Some of the things that are in here that if we buy, we're going to be forced to support that every year. And we don't know what those funds are, what it will cost. And it will also, we don't know what the budget is going to be in those years. And that's an issue. I think looking at things like sewers that we're under a mandate by EPA to take care of, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, those are those the sanitary sewers or are those the storm sewers that we got two different types of sewers. We got the storm sewers and we got the sanitary sewers.
Well, they're both the cause of the issue, I believe, but for the most part, it's sanitary sewer overflows the issue.
But at some point in time, at some point in time, the EPA is going to come knocking, and they're not going to tell us we have a choice. They're going to say, you will fix this, and it's going to cost you whatever many millions of dollars that we won't have. And, you know, I agree, you know, with some of the things that people are saying, that they've got projects, and I've got projects too, but we got to look at this from what's best for the whole city. And we're going to have to pay the piper at some point in time. And we need to look at what's out there that we're going to get caught on. Now, I don't have a lot of sewers in my ward that are a problem. I do have flooding that needs to be addressed, but I will say that we need to take a overhead look at what are we on the hook for with the federal government that we have got to address and how we're going to address it. The other thing is, can we use some of this money to somehow get some bonds or whatever? I don't know if that's something we're allowed because we're having to spend it in such a short time to finance some of this stuff to help us to where we could get more money out of it. But I do think we need to think about that as a council. And yeah, it's what's great for your ward, but overall it better be what's best for this city, because these sewers, when they come knocking, the city is going to be in huge trouble.
Thank you. Alderman Williams and then Alderwoman Purchase.
So, Director Bottoms, this sewer list that you sent out, what is it actually representing? Is it representing the projects that the money we're discussing tonight is going to be spent on?
No, that's just our 10-year capital improvement plan that we had for the area.
Well, so my concern is that I only have one item on here that's $5,000 out of $34,218,000. Ward 3 is only listed on here once for a $5,000 project, which is very important. You know, Stevenson and Adloff is a very, very big problem with the Bel Air area sewer. You know, but then there's none of my other issues, and I'm not the expert. You know, I would yield that you guys are the expert and probably know better than me, priority-wise. You know what's to be done, but I have to say, I can rattle off some other sewer issues that I hear about and have experienced over there. And I'm wanting to trust the system, but when I see something with 40 in one ward and only 1 in another ward, that makes something try to come up out of me that I stay in my calm voice and just say I need some more understanding on how this is put together. Like the Alderwoman said earlier, this doesn't mean we're making decisions tonight. But I truly need to, do some homework and understand this better. Maybe it's that I haven't got the other projects on this list, or your staff haven't got them on the list. I'm not sure, but I do want to raise that issue of one $5,000 project for a ward out of all this that's on here, and other wards have multiple, is a concern to me.
Yep. And if you have certain locations, we can sit down. Feel free. We can sit down with our sewer division. And then these are capital sanitary sewer projects. These aren't necessarily drainage projects or anything along those lines. So I don't want anybody to be confused with that. And then also, I know that we're talking about like the overhead sewer program. It's not necessarily a capital project, and that's not included in here as well, which I know that we're considering.
So, Madam Chairman.
Yes, it was Alderwoman Purchase was next.
Thank you.
So I do understand what Alderman Hanauer is saying to make sure we have priorities, but since I've been up here September 7th, I have been hearing every one of my colleagues talk about their ward specifically. So that made me ask Director Bottom, could he send me a list of what's going on in my area so that I could understand those projects? Since you just brought up what the EPA is asking and requiring us to do, out of that list, is any of that through the requirement of the EPA to make it sensitive? Or I'm not saying that I have, the only projects that need to be done, but just like it alerted Alderman Williams and he only sees one, I saw 40 on there. That really alerted me to what's going on. And then I just hear Chuck talk about how it was downtown with
tank systems, and then downtown Springfield.
Yes, with brick sewers that have not been changed out at all. We can't keep neglecting those areas neither. So we have to start and have some type of plan in place. We're not going to be able to do everything in every ward, but could you send out like at least a list that shows what is required before, like Alderman Hanauer said, they'll be knocking at our door?
Well, we do have the administrative order that's on the website, I believe, and then we do have lining proposed and rehabilitation on the northeast area proposed, basically in our plan, in order to help start combating that as well.
Ms. Chair, if I could real quickly,
Alderman Gregory.
is there? So I guess with much of this, especially with this sewer thing and this road thing, is there? Sanitary sewers, especially, at my ward meeting, one of the stories that I got was, garbage building up and when it floods and, these things, and we heard them frequently. So, when we go through this, the American Rescue Fund, when I talk about this, for me, is to address our worst problems. So is there a way that we can identify the worst sanitary areas? Is there I know there's probably been some type of study or something. I would yield on the professionals to make those determinations. But I think, not only for this, but we really need to, look at that where we have maybe some of the worst issues.
Yeah, and that's what we have in our capital improvement plan. We, like I said, we do use the NASCO rating system. Okay. We televise it. We also check our work orders and everything along those lines. So that'd be a good starting spot.
And I should just quickly clarify, that was why I did ask Director Bonham to send that out to everyone so that you would have an understanding of where the planning has already been for a lot of this. This is not coming up from scratch. It's really years of knowledge of what's going on under our streets. Alderman Redpath?
So we've been here for 10 minutes, and we are on page 1.
Yes.
And it looks like everybody's on the same mindset that the sewers are major problems in all of our wards.
I think we probably need to move on to the next page.
I'm sorry?
Were you going to say it's time to move on to the next page?
I can't hear you.
Time to move on to the next page?
Is it time to move on to the next page?
No, I think we're about done. I think we all know, and Nate, this is maybe it's a compliment to you that we all need our sewers fixed, and this amount of money is a drop in the bucket, as everybody knows, but it's a start, and I think that. Even though you put together this nice presentation for us last week, I appreciate that, but I knew walking into the door last week when we seen it, I know what my problems are. I need sanitary sewers fixed, and the rest of the people around here have their proposals. So I would strongly suggest that we reach out to them and say, give us your top priority, and then we figure that out. It is going to cost more in some of the other wards than it does some. I don't know. Mine's going to cost $3 million, but I know that the sanitary district already has my plans. Whoops, knocked that off, didn't I? The sanitary district already has my plans, the prelims already drawn up, and they're ready to go. So I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. We need to go to page 2.
Yes.
I think we need to go to the other pages, but I do agree with you. I'm hearing a general consensus at this point that $6 million, which is what you said was estimated to be what was allocated for sewers, that number is going to need to be revised upwards.
Yeah, and that was just our portion of the 11.1 million, and there's another portion built into a later portion for the Linden Lane sewers as well. So that's about $8 million total, I believe. No, it's like
$8 million. Yeah, but I think we're hearing general consensus that this is, and I will say, when these funds were released, sewers as an infrastructure improvement was one of the top identified needs nationally. We know that's something that everyone needs to fix. So, I mean, we would be in good company if we identify that as one of our top concerns. That said, the mayor has put some thought and energy into this presentation, so I think we should look at some of the other revenue replacement or other areas that he's proposed. The next one is building stronger, safer neighborhoods, and in here we have fire coverage, equipment and technology upgrades, acquisition of capital needs, and investment in gun violence reduction initiatives for a total of $6.25 million. I think I'll just speak for everyone. If Mayor, if you could maybe just give a little more detail on what's covered by these topics.
Yeah, actually, these were brought forward by Chief Winslow and Chief Blau with regards to what they felt was their highest priority in each of their departments. So with regards to the police, we've talked about license plate readers, LPRs, and, our youth violence initiatives, things of that nature. But I'd ask him to run through that as far as the short list or the priority list that he put forward.
Thank you. Obviously, our number one priority right now is the replacement of our in-car computers. We would replace 160 of those. That's what our officers do the reports on. That's what all of our technology runs upon. They're outdated. They can't run Windows 10, which is what we need to get to make some of our software run efficiently. So that would be our number one priority. Our number two priority is license plate readers, which will help us in our gun violence reduction plan. We're looking at 80 cameras that would be spread throughout the community, but that is an ongoing cost as well. And I heard your conversation a minute ago. Additionally, we presented the idea of the pole-mounted speed signs, the digital speed signs that you had asked us about for the school zones and other locations. We presented 10 of those. Additionally, we presented 2 more Skywatch cameras since they're constantly out and being utilized. Those are the big, what we call eye in the skies that everybody sees around town, as well as 4 more of the Stalker traffic data collectors, and then an additional 4 speed trailers. So those were our highest priorities. We did submit obviously more, but those are ones that are our highest priority.
Do we have questions about this? I will just point out, Chief, and I know you were copied, I copied you on the email. There are grant opportunities to cover some of these specifically. I'd reached out, and I realized the timeline was short, but there's an opportunity through the Department of Transportation to get 80%, 80-20 split for those digital speed readers around schools, elementary and grade schools. So I would at least respectfully submit that maybe we hold something like that in terms of spending, because that's something that we can absolutely pursue grant funds for down the road.
Don't disagree at all. It's only $40,000, so I don't disagree.
And so the in-car computers, how much does that run?
That would be, let me glasses over so I can see here. $600,000.
$600,000. So I guess how much would the police department's ask come up to?
I don't have that all added up because we originally had a much higher, taking off some of the priorities that were not taken in there. We'd be looking at $600,000. We would be looking at another $90,000, so $690, plus another $35,000, $725, plus another $8. That would be $732, $733, I should say. Another $105, so
maybe $1 million.
Less than $1 million probably altogether if I had to add it all up off the top of my head, not counting the license plate readers that are an annual subscription service.
Okay, so I guess maybe we need to have Chief Blau explain. I guess I'm trying to figure out how did we get to $6.25 million? Yeah, Alderman Redpath. And then, I'm sorry, then Alderman Gregory.
I'm Hanauer.
You guys look so much alike to me. Ultimate Hanauer.
Put me for me if you will.
To be fair, I don't get my own children right either, so.
Okay, Chief, and I appreciate the license plate deal, but again, what's that going to cost us annually? Because we got ShotSpotter. We were told it was going to cost us a certain amount. Then we were told we want to expand it, and the hospitals were going to get involved. Well, the hospitals bailed out on us. They're no longer involved, so we're 100% in with these. And I believe that the cost keeps going up on that to us, and I mean, shoot, I'd rather see us hire officers than something like that. But
So to answer your question about license plate readers, we have an RFP out. I don't think I should probably discuss what those
Okay.
RFPs have come in at yet.
That's fair enough. But that's something that needs to be addressed. I see this shot spotter continuing to cost us more money. I still question whether we're getting our bang for the buck for it. No pun intended, but I just don't know that we're seeing the benefits of it for that amount of money. And license plate readers, I could see having them if you can move them around. That might be good. I don't know if they have to be permanent. I don't know the technology at all, but it is something that concerns me because, I don't mind getting tools, but I just don't know that after shot spotter for the cost, seeing the cost, I mean, it's been going up and up and up. I can't see us continuing to look in that direction.
Understand your concerns, but here's how those license plate readers, how we anticipate them being used. Take, for example, our triple homicide. We have a timeline. We could go back, because these would be throughout the community, and narrow down the locations that we have proposed for the LPRs. You could not have entered into that area where that incident occurred without passing through.
Right.
Then we go back and we look at that. If we get a shot spotter alert for a shots fired in the, 2400 block of Yale, and we have LPRs that cover the entries and exits of those areas there, and we know exactly what time it happened because we have a shot spotter alert, that's how it works together. It then goes back and you look and see what cars passed through that area at approximately that time. That's how you narrow it down. That's where you get your advantage of it. Talking to other departments who haven't deployed them, we're not the only ones looking at them. Obviously, Decatur's deployed here recently. Champagne's in the process of deploying. Bloomington's in the process of deploying. Many, many communities around the state, including Rockford and Chicagoland, have deployed these for years. That's how they work together. That's how we see that working as the next step in that gun violence reduction program and holding people accountable for these horrendous events.
But
I do understand the cost, and I do understand the annual cost.
The other aspect to it is we need to start looking at, on the shot spotter stuff, how many shots are fired outside the shot spotter zones. We need to kind of look at that too, because I think you're seeing more and more fired outside those zones than what,
We can get you that data if you'd like to have that data.
Thank you.
Alderman Gregory, and then the real Alderman Redpath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, recently, I was on my way here, and I heard the governor announce that gun violence as a public health emergency. So I'm interested in, what was your intentions with the investment in gun violence and reduction? I'm certainly in favor of more of these speed trailers to put in the school zones, stalker traffic things, all of those good things, as I asked for those quotes previously. What ideas do you have to combat this?
So for us, the gun violence reduction portion of this was the LPRs. The LPRs to coincide with our shot spotter, just like I told you how it would work. Okay. That would be what we were looking at as far as that.
Okay. I appreciate you.
Alderman Redpath.
Chief, what again was the cost of the license plate readers?
We have an RFP out. We have 3 bids we're considering, so I don't think we should reveal that price here.
Okay.
I'll be more than happy to give it to you executive session or something if you want.
I think the license plate reader is a lot more effective tool than shot spotter. I'm not a fan of shot spotter. I know a lot of agencies that don't like it, and so I'd rather see the license plate readers. I think that gives us a better tool.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the chief?
I got one.
Oh, yes, Mayor.
Chief, in your professional opinion, is shot spotter worth it?
Oh, that's a
if you go into
question.
details with it.
It definitely gets us to the location of shots fired. I think we presented it before. We're less than 10% of the time we're even getting a call on shots fired. So we're getting out there. We've saved lives. We've gotten out there, provided CPR, medical treatment, and saved people's lives that normally we don't even get a call on. So how do you value that? So with that said, it's directing us directly to it. We're gathering evidence. We've been able to link evidence from our crimes to other cities, crimes in other cities. It does work. Is it perfect? No. Finding one shot, one shell and one shot, where somebody drove down the road and popped something off or went inside after pop? No, because people aren't calling us on that. So again, if only less than 10% of our people are calling, this really points us into the right direction and shows what we're dealing with, And when we get the 1 point, the one shell case. That's what's hard for us to find, and we don't have a high success rate in locating those one shells. Again, a lot of times we get the shot spot alert before we even do get a call. If we do get a call, it's usually later on. It may be a minute later, maybe 3 minutes later. A lot of times people are trying to digest what they heard and decide whether or not they want to get involved. Or they're thinking somebody else is going to call it in, and then nobody does. We've had incidents where there's been 30 or 40 shots fired and nobody called. But the shot spot alert took us there, and then we got the broken windshield glass, we got shell cases, and then 45 minutes somebody shows up at the hospital, or they show up in a neighboring community hospital saying they got shot somewhere else, which we are able to use that as an investigative tool to say, no, that's not what happened. This is where it occurred. So is it a perfect system? No, I'm not going to stand here and say it's a perfect system. Do I see value in it? Absolutely.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions for the chief right now. Thank you very much. If Chief Blau can come up and talk to us about the improved fire protection coverage.
The main things that were on there from the Springfield Fire Department would cover a little bit of cost. I think it's less than $20,000 is what we said it would cost for proximity dispatching, which would be a cooperative with 911. And we started trying to do this several years ago in my previous capacity. And what that allows us to do is utilize software to dispatch the unit, the apparatus that we would have most efficiently, because sometimes depending on traffic patterns and speed limits and bridges that some of our apparatus can't get under, we can get there up to a minute faster with something that actually looks like it's farther away, and you're not asking that dispatcher to come up with that. But it's actually already built into the dispatching software. What that would cover would be possibly to come in and have somebody train some people at 911 that would help get that in place.
Is this a GPS situation?
GIS, yeah, GIS, yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
But basically what it does is it can measure by looking at the map and which way you would go within the streets to get places faster. Once you get to a certain point, maximizing that last 15 to 20 seconds, is what you're really kind of going for, and that's what that would do. And it was a relatively cheap ask. So I think that was one of the reasons why it was chosen. The other project was one that all of you are familiar with, that we had in the budget a couple of years ago for the paging system, and we decided with the anticipated possible building of some relocated fire stations that we would hold that back until we got that project started, because I didn't feel that it was prudent to put paging systems into buildings that then we were going to have to turn around and move them out of. So that was the other part. As far as the rest of the portion of the money that we talked to the mayor and some other entities in the room that day with, was mostly build outs for relocation programs for the actual new stations. But as far as how much that is, that wasn't really up to me. That was but I imagine that's a significant component of the 6.2 or 6.4, whatever that says there. I defer to the mayor, though, as far as what the amount was that he wanted to put towards that project.
I thought we'd actually already budgeted that in this year's budget.
Actually, we want to build 3 new stations, one out southwest, one would be more to the west, the relocation of the Chatham Road one that we talked about, and then the one over by Isles Park. So we allocate $1 million for each station, and then the rest would be covered by the budget through Director McCarty and what he's allocated with regards to that. So really, it's close. I can't remember what the other amounts, but this 6.25 then would be pretty much split, depending on what that paging system cost. I'm not sure what that was.
Paging system, almost 2 years ago now, we were right at $500,000. As you know, especially with technology stuff, the prices have gone up. If it's going to take another year to put that in, I would anticipate that it's going to be 550,000 to 600,000.
So 3.52 for fire and the rest for police.
Well, I think since Chief Winslow just gave us his estimate at $1 million, so I think we just found $2 million to put back into sewers.
That was more than likely it was a 3-year commitment to LPRs or 2 years commitment or whatever. You can run the math, but that's what it would be for.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Chief Blau?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then the next tab that we were sent was job creation and economic development. This total investment the mayor proposed is $7 million. Broadband, it includes broadband access, housing pipeline, including a land bank, workforce and business development, and Mayor, I'm assuming this additional $2 million is the HUD dollars that we were just recently talking about. So that would be separate. That would be separate from the ARPA. So, okay, Alderwoman Purchase.
Yes. This is for the mayor. Mayor, could you go over the zip codes for broadband access that you had the study on?
Yeah, we did a original study. I think it was, we started it prior to the pandemic, but took a look at 62701, 02, and 03, and what the gap of broadband service was within that area.
And is that the focus that you're trying to do as far as when we move into this phase?
Correct. We allocated a small amount, but what we tried to do is leverage it with a third-party provider, like Comcast or i3 Broadband or whatever the case may be, to make sure that we could fulfill that gap of service. And then also with the initiative, it's not only within the invested areas, but also I think you could extend broadband, because I know we've had this discussion many times with Comcast that we have newly developing areas and they won't run it until you have so many houses in that area. So we would probably have a discussion on that as well.
Okay, and my last question is, can you just share a little bit about the land bank, especially since we just got the Enos Park TIF renewed?
With the land bank, there's numerous ways you can go about it, but the main point is everybody says, oh, we have a land bank. No, it's not up to the level that we can. Really, it's a pooling all our land resources together, whether it's Enos Park, Springfield project, and what the city owns, but you utilize that as an economic driver. So I tie it together with the affordable housing development. It's about building up your neighborhoods, especially in the inner core. And when you look at, just drive along those areas, how are you going to do the infill development? And how I view it as a block by block. So we did allocate through COVID some dollars for renovation. So we'd work with like Bone Training Institute and some other entities to do a rehab of a house. And then if there's any infill development to happen there, we should find partners to do the infill development. And then homeowners on that same block, hopefully if they either through TIF or CDBG funds, help them update their house on the exterior, especially with your roof and things of that nature. So you're building up block by block within those areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Donnelly?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Under one of the categories on this page is workforce business development. I'd just like the mayor's consideration, the council's consideration for a concept that I've been working on and talked about before in the chamber, about some type of incentive funds for whether it's, there's really three parts, would be maybe helping attract new police officers, more of a lateral entry type program. It doesn't necessarily have to be just that, but as a concept, the mayor and I talked about that, and that's all we've done is talk about it. There's nothing in print. And then the idea also of, we were named the #1 post-COVID city, when and if that ever happens, and the concept of what we've all learned with this new environment that we've been living in the last couple of years is that a significant number of people can live anywhere, and they can telecommute. They don't necessarily have to be in the larger cities. Some people may want to move to Springfield, so some type of incentive for telecommuters, as well as the third component would be some type of incentive for recent graduates, so they can actually come back to Springfield Young people are extremely important, and I just wanted to throw that out there. Whether it's an eligible part of this program or not, that's something we need to determine, but I'd like at least to be considered and keep it on the table for the record this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Gregory?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this section here, I think, is very, very, very important. I actually, out of all the numbers around, I wish this one was, up there near the highest. We have broadband access. Last year, we helped the school district out with Wi-Fi boxes. The digital divide has been reported on, not only in our city, but, in other cities as well. So I think that's very, very important, especially for the zip codes that have been studied to have this such a divide. Going down to the plan for affordable rehab and infill housing developments. I'm really excited to hear that. We all have seen the disparities, housing disparities reported on. We've seen the income disparities. And for us, it has to be important for us to take this opportunity, as we say, once in a lifetime, generational moment to address two very ugly marks for Springfield. And I think we have to take advantage of this. There's no way, to me, on God's green earth, that Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abe Lincoln, has such leads in those two categories. It's unacceptable, and we have to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and really address, affordable housing and our workforce and business development. So, when we do amend this, I hope that we are mindful and supportive of the things that do come forth to try to reverse this trend and try to get us going in the right direction. That's all on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for this topic? I will ask, Mayor, if you could maybe just break down a little bit how you would envision this money being broken out, $7 million, how much would go to each of these categories? I have questions about the broadband access, if that is the city funding the infrastructure, the laying of the new cables, and then partnerships with for-profit businesses to provide access, or I guess I'm still not quite clear on how you see that one working. But if we could just have like a breakdown of funds for these three categories and then kind of more of a description of that partnership.
Yeah, the broadband specifically, two ways we could use it. If we utilize our own fiber, I'll just use I3 broadband or one of the ones that are building out west. They're building out there because that's where the rooftops, that's where the money is. To get them to go to the east side, we allow them to jump across using our fiber, and then they reconnect. And so that mile of roads, that would help offset the cost, and then they would, in turn, have to supply that access to east side residents or, near north or what have you. The other concept is with Comcast, of course, they already have their cable system all over the place, so we could leverage funds to assure that they up the level because they've received a significant amount of money through the federal government for broadband, but they have a base level. And that base level is not to the level that you need to be at to compete. And so when you talk about economic development, what we want to do is develop our inner core, because the reason for that, that's a greater propensity for property tax revenues to come in. Because if you have a property that's undeveloped, then you start developing, of course, you're going to have a greater propensity for development. And so I'll use Alderman Donlan's question about the remote workers. It's ideal. They want that access or that capable access to upload and download files as fast as possible. So we may be able to, we're checking on partnering with Comcast in that same capacity to determine which route would be the best route to take. So we're going to try to leverage ARP funds or whatever resources we have to the best way possible. But again, of course, all this will be figured out in the budget or how we move forward. It comes back to the council. But those are two areas that we would take a look at to maximize it, because it is a very expensive process with regards to broadband extension. But we want to keep it affordable on the areas that can't afford it. And how do we leverage that as much as possible so they can be, have that access, but also you're using it as an economic driver in those areas.
And if I could then, because you say intercord the city a lot, and I would just kind of, my ward goes east to MacArthur, and I have, fairly large swath of older neighborhoods with what I would consider very close to the heart of downtown. I look at these neighborhoods, and to me, I just see opportunities because, when we have the Third Street corridor completed with the rail, and we've got, this walking, biking, we've got new energy going into downtown, I see those neighborhoods in my ward as being really prime for development and for attracting younger people, young families. So, but when you say inner core, where are you looking? Because I'd like to know that those neighborhoods would have access to high-speed internet. I mean, especially, as Alderman Donilon pointed out very correctly, if we want our community to grow, if we want to have that growth mindset, it has to be younger people. We do need to keep attracting. We need to attract our high school students from our city as they go out and see the world and then come back. This is a great place. Those houses are affordable. I love them. They're these, the older neighborhoods have so much character and quality, but they do not have as good, always, infrastructure supports. So I guess I'm asking, how far into Ward 8 are you going to come with your definition of inner core? And where are we targeting? Is it just these 3 zip codes?
Well, actually, it's where the gap of service is. And when you say inner core, I know you probably don't figure that's inner core. I grew up in MacArthur, Bless-Sacrament area. That used to be the west side of Springfield. That's the inner city right now. I mean, when you look at the growth, just look at where the businesses want to locate. They're on the perimeter. You can draw almost a circle around Springfield. So it's that infill development that will really make the difference. And so, that's what you want to look at when young people come in to town. We have realtors in the back. I'm sure they could tell you where they look first. Young people look downtown. Is it vibrant? They'll look where the broadband access is. That's where they're going to migrate to. So that's what we want to make sure we lift up all those areas. But specifically in your ward, one of the things they did mention, which goes to the affordable housing aspect, is what we want to do is promote home ownership through this as much as possible, because that's what changes, the neighborhoods. And how do you make sure that people that can't afford to fix up their house are able to before they get to the point of disrepair? And that's one of the initiatives we take a look at. On the other side of it is, with one of the workforce development we're looking at is actually, and this ties into the gun program, because these are overlapping issues or interests. How do we reach out to the young people to stop the proliferation of young people going into the gangs? And so we need to show them the job opportunities right here in Springfield. And that's one of the initiatives that we would bring forward, is opening up their eyes to the opportunities we have here, whether it's in the police department, fire department, at the utility, or whatever the case may be, or in the hospitals. So there's a lot of great opportunities. Sometimes they're not aware of it, and that's what we want to do, is broaden that awareness associated with those opportunities to our young people in high school and as they move forward.
So, thank you, Mayor. And so I guess kind of what I'm hearing is that this could possibly be leveraged for areas like some of my older neighborhoods that are not part of an existing TIF. I don't have those sorts of funds available to, new businesses, homeowners, low-income homeowners that are in that part of my ward. So you would see this as a supplement to add on top of those other programs?
With regards to that, especially with homeowners, we have other resources we can leverage. Community Development Block Grant funds. Those are through HUD, and that's what we can utilize based on the individual's income. I'll give you an example of this one I did look at recently. For a family of 3, that's a married couple with 1 child. If they earn $61,000, they would qualify for those type of funds. So that's what we look at. So that's prime for some individuals, and that's what we'd look to leverage as much as possible, because as we pointing it out, we're just on category 3, and where do you put the priority? This is very challenging. People think $34 million is a lot. It goes like that because our needs are so great. But how do you pick and choose between safety, gun violence, and then you have the, what we've all talked about is how do we get people back to work, things like that, and then you have the other side with the sewer issues. So that's the balancing act of trying to leverage these funds through grants, like you had said, and other initiatives as much as possible. So these are the concepts we're bringing forward, but we are going to try to leverage as much as possible the dollars that are available to us.
Thank you. Alderwoman Perch, are you good? Okay, are there any other questions? Alderman Hanauer.
Yeah, I got a question, Mayor. So along with this, we have the cannabis money, and I was just thinking, it looks like estimated approximately, cannabis money is going to be about $1 million this year. Is that about?
Director McCarty?
Approximately.
Probably a little bit more.
Did we wake you up, Bill?
Probably a little bit more.
A little bit more
Are
than
we
$1
looking
million.
at, you might want to come up here.
Why not?
Trying to get Sean more money, man.
Come on with it.
So have we looked at, we've got this, but have we looked at bonding that, to try to leverage and get more money? I mean, if we know we're going to get approximately $1 million a year for that particular fund, wouldn't it make sense to look at, like what we do with the automobiles, to where we can finance more money to provide, I don't know, maybe some of the rehab and infill developments, on an annual basis. I mean, that's.
But it's not $1 million. It's only $500,000 that's going towards that type of stuff. The other goes to police and fire.
The other ones, I'm talking about, I thought the $1 million just for you. Is that the whole thing?
It's about $1 million
Okay, even 500,000, Sean. I mean, that's, if you can bond that and get more money out of it, that's still pretty dang good.
Yeah, but is that, those funds already dedicated, Bill?
You can, those funds aren't dedicated to anything right now. That money's not dedicated to anything right now. I mean, we track this stuff separately, so we know how much money is there for the pensions. And as you know, we already did one transfer of that, and we'll be doing another one as we built up a more balance. But as far as the money that's dedicated for the development in East Springfield, none of that's been allocated as of yet. Now, can you? Sure, you can bond it. You can bond any revenue stream that you want. It doesn't actually get you more money. It just gets you more money more quickly. You get more up front. But on the back end later on, you've got to use that money to pay back the loan. So just depending on the timing of everything. Right now, you don't even have any projects allocated, and you've got, several $100,000. So
I'm just looking at a way to spread that, and get more, more bang.
You can do more.
And that's, I was thinking about that with the.
Yeah, you could do more faster, more up front doing that as an approach rather than spread it out evenly over time. I mean, it's just a matter of how quickly you want to do things.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Gregory, did you?
Thank you. My thoughts on just on the housing portion. Me and the mayor had a lot of talks, nothing on paper, just talks, but of how to leverage any type of money that we put in from the American Rescue Fund for infill development and housing redevelopment from local banks and things of that nature. When we go back and forth on the numbers, we're talking about approximately 9,000 homeowners to 40,000 homeowners, and we're talking about a $42,000 difference between the tracks, basically, going towards your wards and versus mine. So it's very, very hard for constituents in my ward to even come up with 30% or 50% of TIF and all of those things. Thus why the TIF is sitting with $3.5 million in one and $1.5 million in another. We can't get businesses over there because nobody wants to come over there because it looks a mess for the most part. And then it's hard to get people to housing because they don't have the money. And so that's why I've been working on just different things to try to study the TIFs and study what's going to work well with that. And I think by using a nice portion of this section of $7 million towards home redevelopment in multiple parts of the city, but especially mine, we can grow. And this is something with more homeowners and more people living in nice homes that's going to grow our overall tax base. This is not something that we're going to have to continue to pay for. This is a good investment to help us grow. We talk about some of the problems that we're going to go through. This is important to get people stabilized in workforce and their housing and the housing market. If we can see that grow over the next 5 years to 15 or 20,000, and where that disparity isn't so large, we got a sound city. But we got to make the needed investments, in my opinion. Last comment. Thank you.
No, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions on this category? Seeing none, move on to the clean, reliable water. This one has a proposed total investment of $8.25 million. I'm assuming this is probably Doug Brown. Like some of this is yours. Total ARPA investment on enhanced cybersecurity, technology for aeration of Lake Springfield, increased lead line replacement proposal, and upgrading equipment for the aging South Fork pumping system. If you maybe just give a little bit more information about what these categories mean. Have you actually identified something, technology that will assist in aerating Lake Springfield?
Yes.
And we're sure it's going to keep those phone calls about the taste of the water down?
Well, what I can tell you is that the aeration portion is a technology that's, I mean, it's never a guarantee. To control the process of the lake and how the nature works. But there are other options that we want to do a study on to see what those costs would be for more advanced technologies that we would basically have a treatment process that we could use to be able to do that. So that's what we want to do is look at doing the aeration, though, will improve the health of the lake. We just don't know. We just can't quantify it. It can't really be quantified with that, but it definitely does help. The cybersecurity, I think it kind of speaks for itself. Basically, the controls for the water plant need to have an upgrade. So that's important. And both of those are benefiting the entire city. So it's not just any one ward.
Do you have a total, just a ballpark figure for what those two would cost?
The cybersecurity, I think, maybe is about $600,000. The aeration is probably in the study is about $950,000 to $1 million.
Okay.
The lead service line replacement is basically to allow us to do an inventory of our lead lines. We want to be accurate on the count, and the only way to really do that is actually go on what they call do a pothole on it, verify the material that's there. That way we're not sending an entire crews and contractors to the site, digging it up and saying, oh, hey, this wasn't a lead service line. So that's estimated to be about $1 million. And then, of course, our South Fork pump station, that's basically how we refill Lake Springfield out of the South Fork Creek.
So I'm sorry, you said about $1 million for the lead line, and that's the city's portion of the lines.
What I'm talking about is an inventory. So that's how we're identifying all the lead service lines out in the city that we have.
And that would be $1 million for the inventory?
What was that?
How much would that inventory cost?
It's about $1 million.
That's $1 million. Okay, and then you also have in there transitioning households from septic to sewer, which I believe Alderman Redpath was talking about earlier.
Yes, the Linden Lane sewer line project.
And how much is that?
I think that's maybe like $1 million plus. Plus, there's other engineering work that's been added here. I'm assuming that's for the rest of it for that, and that's something I'd probably have to get with Nate to kind of figure out the total cost for all of that.
Okay.
Because it does impact us as well, so it's kind of a cross effort between Public Works and us.
And yet Nate's letting you stay up there by yourself. Does anyone have any questions for the director on these issues?
Do you have
the Linden Lane one was actually $2.3 million, but we were getting some cost sharing with St. County Water Reclamation District as well as once residents hook up, there would be a reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, just on the last item, Doug.
Oh, yeah.
The upgrading equipment for South Fork pump system. Do you have an estimated dollar amount on that?
Todd, do you remember what the estimate was? That's right at $1 million. Yeah, and those pumps are 75 years old, essentially. So that's why they need to get replaced.
does that anticipate the possibility of Sancris Lake, which is being left behind by the coal-fired power plant there?
Well, these pumps are what we're using now to supplement the water for Lake Springfield. So we need to upgrade these pumps so that way we have access to that now. We don't want to keep relying on these 75-year-old pumps that are getting harder and harder to maintain every year, and we need to have a reliable source of water, currently. I mean, this is more immediate, that we could have new pumps within, probably a year, or maybe a little bit longer because of lead times growing.
Well, if the city were able to gain some rights to Sancris Lake, then we'd want to anticipate future spending for our pumps. If we were to pump from Sancris Lake into the South Fork of the Sangamon River and then pump from there into our Lake Springfield.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would require more additional capital for additional pumps.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Alderman Hanlon?
Yeah, as far as the cybersecurity, I think that's one thing that we need to look at, not just for CWLP, but we got to look at as a city, we've all read about different cities and that have gotten hit with ransomware, and Channel 20 actually got hit, and it really caused them problems. Yeah. And so I think that is something very important. If not from this, we need to continue to push forward, Mayor, on cybersecurity, better firewalls and detection systems. So that is very important.
Thank you. I just want to share then real quickly, in conversations about this funds, I did mention to I've mentioned to constituents the concept that we have of replacing septic systems along Lake Springfield. And I will tell you, I think generally speaking, the response was horror that we have septic systems on Lake Springfield. That is our city's drinking water supply. And we know it's treated, and we know it's treated well, but people were shocked to find that out. So I appreciate Director Brown bringing that up to us. Do we have any other questions on this one? No, we'll move to our last item. Reimagining. Is it reimagining Lincoln's hometown? So Director Dahl, I know I saw Scott in, there he is. Mayor has proposed $1.4 million in here. I think Director or Mayor, you can kind of explain, but it looks like kind of just replacing funds, going back to business as it was.
Yeah, absolutely, Chairwoman. Pre-pandemic, our fund balance was $1.6 million. We projected at the end of FY22 that would be $500,000. We lost 40% revenue, tourism revenue, since the pandemic started. So really, a couple of things have helped that anyway. Our Ltcb Grant, our largest state tourism grant, the only grant that we're receiving right now, it was 50% funded in our FY21 and FY22. We don't know what to anticipate. Of course, our fiscal year starts March 1st. The state starts July 1st. It was fully funded this year, so we received $514,000 for our Ltcb Grant. So that's going to push our fund balance up a little bit at the end of FY22. However, that was using federal dollars. So we're anticipating possibly back to that 50% funding in our FY23 or July 1st of 21. So we're looking ahead to that. But primarily 70% of this ask, this $1.4 million, is revenue replacement. It's also to cover our History Comes Alive program. Pre-pandemic, we were spending $100,000. Part of that was with state grant money. Remember, we have about 1 million visitors a year, leisure visitors that come through Springfield. History Comes Alive is a big part of that. We reduced that down to $25,000 spend in our FY22. So this past summer, it was at 25% of what it typically is. Technology as well. This is on the slides. housing, conventions, and the sports complex. Anticipating the sports complex coming down the pipeline, having a housing program will give us the data and the analytics that we need moving forward. If we do not take this opportunity, then somebody else will. They'll have a third party do it, and we won't have control of that data on the side of housing. Remember, we're talking about tournaments that have 120 plus teams, maybe possibly 20 or 30 times a year. So to control that. It would also serve us well on the convention side. Typically, a city of our size does not have a housing division or housing program, and so it's a nice benefit when you're booking conventions in the city. And then last but not least, local tourism grants, promotion, and partnership on local events. Remember, we cut that line in FY21 and again in FY22. We could bring some of that back with this ask. And I'll remind the City Council we're asking for 3.5% of the total ARPA dollars through the Bureau.
Thank you. Alderman Redpath.
Scott, the housing part of it's a very integral part of making this sports complex a success. Is there any way that we can have them pick up some of it, the sporting complex, to help us with that?
Yeah, I think they will, and I think we can move SFA, which I believe would be the operator, would move through. They can hire a third party and they can do it on their own. I just think we lose some control there, and this may be an opportunity for us to have all that booking information and to run that through the city versus having a third party do it. So absolutely,
I agree with you. I just was trying to figure out how we could get that money put together, because that's probably the most important part of this proposal to me.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to turn the success for the sports complex.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's fees that we can add to cover some of those costs. The good news is the software itself has built-in fees. So we're really looking at somebody, not even to manage the booking side of it, just to manage the overall program of that. We do have an open position, sales executive position, that we can combine the two. We also need some help on the services side, so we can combine those two. So we actually have a budgeted position, so we wouldn't be adding that much cost to personnel. It would really just be maintaining.
So we need to talk about this in budget too.
Yep.
And not just the ARP funds. This is a very, very important part.
Absolutely, Alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Purchase and then Alderman Gregory.
Thank you. How much is that software?
Well, we're $10,000 to $20,000, so it's really not that cost. It's really the personnel behind it that we would need to have there. We could certainly, again, I have an open position, so not like we're creating a position. So there are some management fees behind it, or some operating fees behind it. So what the software company does is for every room that they book, they attach a fee. And so that's where they make their majority of their money on the booking software.
How much is that fee?
And I don't know. It'll all go through on the contracting side, and that would be, that'd be really up to. And again, we want to be part of that conversation. I think that's where we're trying to get in on that conversation before the operator or the developer decides to go their own direction. I think, again, there's an opportunity for us not only to parlay this into the convention side as well, which will help us track more larger conventions down the road because we have that housing side.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because that helps your marketing for everything. We can use that data for marketing, not just the sports complex, but marketing other stuff in the city.
Absolutely, right. Absolutely, and that's where we're trying to go, is we're trying to use that for not just the complex itself, but for these larger conventions. Because again, when you're a meeting planner and you're looking at booking several hotels and you have to coordinate all of the housing, that takes the relief off that meeting planner or that convention, and it's a really nice service. Matter of fact, at one point, I believe about 15, 20 years ago, we had a housing division at the Bureau, and it is a really nice selling point to these larger conventions.
Thank you. Alderman Gregory and then Alderman Hanauer.
So are we referencing like more of a site where someone can go on and book their rooms when they come here? And is that what you're referring to? For the tournaments, so, if I'm bringing my son or daughter to a tournament, I'm going to book from this site. Is
not for individuals.
Okay.
For conventions. Okay. So for groups and conventions, yes, and of course the sports complex as well. So there would be for like the sports complex, there'd be predetermined teams that we'd be booking through this system. For conventions, same thing. You would open that up to your attendees, and then they would, book through this system. But not just for a leisure traveler. No, they would book directly with the hotel. we wouldn't want to absorb those costs. Remember, we sell 800,000 room nights a year in the city of Springfield, so some of these costs we wouldn't want to pass along to just the leisure.
Alderman Hanauer and then Alderman Fulgenzi.
Yeah, Scott, I think no matter what, I think for budget this year, if you could get us a cost, and I don't know if that's the only software product or if we got to go off our RFP, but I think we definitely you should at least bring that forward because it is something we could use for other things. I'm definitely in favor of it. You know, and Alderman Williams, you talked, this would be something that we could use to make sure people stay in Springfield and at Crown or wherever. You know, I think it is important, and not just for the sports complex, but for everything. And if it's 40,000 or something like that, I think we could get our money back pretty quick on that.
Absolutely, we could. Yeah, and again,
please include that in the budget.
We'll do, and part of that's the manpower, which again, we've already got that position budgeted for. We just need to combine those duties.
Thank you, Alderman Fulgenzi, and then the mayor.
Yes, the thing I don't want us to overlook is the importance of Route 66 because the anniversary is coming up in 2026, and I was reminded of it tonight when a gentleman stopped in from California. He left Santa Monica the first part of September, I believe, and he's been riding his bicycle here, and he's on his way to Chicago. And I think that's amazing that people think that much of the route itself, and they devote that much time to it.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, Alderman Fulgenzi, and really another aspect and another initiative that could be, and whether that's in the budget or right here, but I believe it belongs right here, is creating a podcast studio at our visitor center in the Tinsley Dry Goods on the backside. We can invite podcasters, bloggers, influencers, travel media, all to be and do their shows right out of our studio. So here you are in a historic building, the Lincoln Herndon Law Offices, doing your podcast or doing your blogging out of that studio. And really where this came from was the State of Sound. The State of Sound at the Presidential Museum this year has been very, very popular, and they've had at least 10 stations that have done their shows from the State of Sound. And we've been a part of every one of those. We provide them accommodations, and then we get a spot on the show. And that really got us thinking about how we can expand that, just not statewide, but nationwide, and what that would mean for people coming in. I really believe that we could take that, put something in there, about $25,000 would be the cost. We can turn that $25,000, I believe, into millions of earned media down the road.
Scott, you always come in with the most excitement and enthusiasm for your job. Thank you.
Scott's going to start.
I'm sorry, Mayor, you wanted to say something too.
Thank you. The 1.4 million, just so everybody understands, we came up with that number. That's the ordinance that was presented. So if we probably need some direction at some point because we prefer it just being passed. But if not, we'll need to determine, how we work that into the budget or whatever the case may be. But this was, I asked Director Dahl to split that up on how you would use it with the ARP funds because it's sitting in the committee, and we knew that the council wants some activity or some action-based activities tied to that number.
So this is the ordinance we held in committee, spending ordinance, okay.
I think you can pass it tomorrow night.
Does that include the podcasting studio, though?
It does. It does.
Okay, there we go. Do we have any other questions around this fund?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that was all we have from our directors. Mayor, I don't know if you had any other comments you wanted to add at this time?
TSI, you're going to call them?
Yeah. I don't know if I don't see that we had anyone sign up to speak, but I do know that there are people in the audience who'd like to speak. Kayla, are you? Okay, if you want to come up. And as I mentioned, I am going to be strict. We're gonna stick to 5 minutes and no more than 5 minutes. So they gave me the really big gavel this week. Yeah, if you could
Perfect. I'm Kayla Graven, Executive Director of Downtown Springfield, Inc. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time for this historic moment to be able to apply these funds to our community. And I believe each one of you should have received our presentation earlier. So I'm going to run through this very quickly because I understand it's late and we have tomorrow night as well. So Downtown Springfield, Inc. did identify funding opportunities through the American Rescue Funds that we see as a priority. So the first one is we got to make sure those businesses that have made it through the pandemic in downtown are able to sustain through. So grants for tenants to make property improvements, and we're seeing maybe $10,000 of a grant application process for those previously, those businesses that have been in downtown previous to the pandemic happening. And this could be part of the business district category and also help for those negative impacts to districts is. Another thing that we've mentioned tonight is about trying to figure out how we can post-COVID have livable apartments to our downtown area. We have a lot of plans on the shelves. DSI started going through some of those plans, and the 2012 SDAT did say we need more livable spaces in downtown. And we did, during the pandemic, host the Upstairs Downtown program that did identify how these property owners can make income-generating apartments in our downtown area. So we suggest that some of the American Rescue Fund plans can be used for grants for property owners to have sewer main improvements to add residential units and also water main improvements to add residential units as well. Downtown Springfield has their roots in street festivals. So something that we also saw was public spaces coordinator. We have all these open spaces that are underutilized, and DSI does have the tools to be able to activate these spaces. And so something that we saw was a position at DSI that would be funded through American Rescue Fund plans to oversee and program activation spaces on the North Mason block, like we do with Lovett, or the Bicentennial Plaza, or the outdoor plaza that's coming through the multi-mobile unit, and the Old State Capitol Plaza like we do for the Old Capitol Holiday Walks. This funding would include for a position salary and also seed money for programming. And we were seeing this as a 5-year commitment. We are starting with you guys first to see if this is something feasible in our community, something you guys are interested, and we also can go reach out to the county with the mobile unit being a space that we've targeted for activation, and also the realtors as well. And my last one is public restrooms. Public restrooms are always a need in downtown. We also seen it as an increased need during the pandemic as well. We are making the suggestion to be the Portland Loo, which we've discussed previously. We know that the best location would be the Old State Capitol Plaza, and it's designed to be safe. It's designed for urban environments, and it's graffiti proof. And also, it can withstand our temperatures up to negative 13 degrees. So that's my presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Chair, I've got no question, but I got a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Alderman.
I'm glad that, Kayla, that you mentioned the county American Recovery Plan monies, because I think they've got about 30 million. And so half the population of the county is in the city. So the city wants to make sure that we get some of that county money for city projects. And so maybe we can partner with the county, leverage some of our money with some of their money. And then let's not forget the school district, because they're getting over $100 million. And when we mentioned the broadband expansion, there's another huge opportunity to get the school district funds to match our funds or whatever, and make good things happen in our neighborhoods. So thank you for mentioning the county money.
Yeah, this money doesn't always have to come out of the pool that we have here, but you guys could help us secure other funding, other capacities as well.
Thank you. Alderwoman Purchase, and then Alderman Gregory.
Thank you for your presentation, Kayla. And I'm definitely in full support of the public space coordinator, because I'm hearing a lot of concerns about the Bicentennial Plaza, that people don't have access to it, they can't book the space. So I think that this would really help us to navigate through all those areas that you just acknowledged. So I hope that we're able to do that too as well.
Thanks. And, we do get the phone calls. We've gotten phone calls how, with maybe not be able to have weddings indoors. We've gotten phone calls about how they can have weddings on the Y Block or in these other places in downtown. And, downtown's just beautiful photographic-wise, too. So this position could help with coordinating that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just briefly, great points, Alderwoman Purchase on the Bicentennial Plaza. I also have heard those complaints coming on. Very, very, very beautiful place. I know the city helped out with that with some nice, unique artwork and pictures there. So I hope that we move forward towards that. Definitely are working towards some Y Block things. Both of those lie in Ward 2. But as far as what you did mention, I know we talked briefly about the water main lines. I think that is really, really, really important for downtown, and I would support any move that Alderwoman Purchase did to help that. The end game is what I look at, and with more people living downtown, of course, it overall helps our bottom line. So that would be a good investment for the city to make, and I would support that.
Thank you. It is something that was also identified as a hurdle during our upstairs downtown plan that we went through.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing those in. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alderman Williams.
So no hanging flower
Off my subject.
baskets.
Oh, you'll see hanging baskets one day in downtown.
You sure will.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And thank you for keeping that well under 5 minutes. I'm impressed.
Yeah, in 30 seconds
I
left.
listen.
You did that well. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak tonight? All right, seeing none. Chief.
It's the way you said it.
So earlier, my old eyes missed the line here.
Oh, no.
When we talked $1 million, our ask is closer to $1.9 million.
Oh.
With that said, there were 60 in-car cameras that are subscription-based and a reoccurring fee of about $150,000 a year. So if we did a 3-year contract, they'll give you more.
It's only Halloween, Chief. It's not Christmas yet.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments or questions on the plan from the mayor? Anyone, Mayor, if you'd like to add something?
Not really. Well, just on the SCVB funds, that'd be helpful in providing direction if you'd rather us include it in the budget or whatever the case may be, or if you're comfortable with the direction set forward on the $1.4 million. We appreciate everybody's feedback tonight, and as you know, it's not going to be easy to determine it, but we have to keep our eye on what's the priority for our community as we move forward and make long-lasting, impactful changes. That's what these dollars represent, and leveraging as much as possible with the grant dollars, the infrastructure funds, which hopefully come from the federal government, and other resources that were brought up with regards to other entities that have received ARPA funds as well.
Thank you very much. And everyone, I just want to say I appreciate everyone taking the time to be here tonight. This was an important conversation to us to just have focused. I certainly heard more about sewers tonight, and I'm encouraged by that because I think we probably need to be looking at shifting some funds around even within that to make sure that that high priority area is met. But seeing no other comments, no one else is planning to speak, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Because I don't want it to stop like that.
Bye. Thank you, all of them.
See you tomorrow.
I'll be here tomorrow. Same, yeah.
Same class, same place, same bathroom.
Yeah, the bank.